The C-SPAN Civics bus is traveling the country, visiting libraries, bookstores, festivals, and authors. Here are some of the people and places we visited.
We are here at the University of Illinois Chicago with Walter Benn Michaels, author of The Trouble with Diversity: How We Learn to Love Identity and Ignore Inequality. Walter, first tell us how you came up with the title for this book.
Well, I've just been struck by the fact that over the last 20 or 25 years, we've had a kind of increasing commitment in the U.S. to appreciating diversity, which has reached a kind of high point with the election yesterday. And that at the same time, almost precisely during those same 25 years, we've had what has now been widely recognized as a radical increase in economic inequality in the U.S. So I've been struck by the fact that people who were deeply committed to various forms of racial, sexual, and other forms of justice, that is to ending various forms of discrimination, were comparatively indifferent to the fact that actually in the U.S. the major development over the last 25 years has been that the rich have been getting richer and the poor have not. So what the book is about is how it is that liberals in particular have come to sort of focus on the problems and pleasures of identity and to ignore the problems and complete lack of pleasures, unless you're on the rich side, of inequality.
And you mention all this in your book, and you don't mention Obama's name at all, and with the election yesterday.
Well, the book was published at a time when no one even, I mean, it's only about a year and a half ago, but even so people knew Obama was running, but I don't think very few people were predicting at that time that Obama would be a successful candidate. But I think it's important because, first of all, it does demonstrate the degree to which today in the U.S. it doesn't matter anywhere near as much whether you're black or white as it does whether you're rich or poor. You know, upper middle class black people have a whole lot more in common with upper middle class white people than either one of them do with poor people. So part of what the book is about is precisely the conditions under which a kind of centrist Democrat like Obama, who despite his one injudicious remark to Joe the plumber about spreading the wealth, has actually throughout his entire career manifested zero interest in spreading very much wealth. Someone like Obama can nonetheless emerge as the kind of head of American liberalism, where the fact that he is a black man matters a lot more to American liberals than the fact that he's kind of comparatively indifferent to the problems of economic inequality.
And he did have that comment to Joe the plumber, and that catapulted a whole conversation about the economic status in this country. How do you think he's going to handle that?
Well, you know, first of all, if you take him at his word, he's not going to raise taxes on anybody on the middle class, or as he puts it, people making below $200,000 a year. But you know, if you're making $200,000 a year, you're not actually in the middle class. You're in the 98th percentile of American wealth. So he's way better than McCain was with respect to that, because McCain didn't basically want to tax anybody. But I don't think that Obama, left to his own devices, has much interest in spreading the wealth. I think that the thing that's made the difference, and actually also the thing that's obviously helped get him elected, was that when this campaign started, the economy was a problem, but not a crisis. And now, of course, lots of people think that we may be on the verge of, at best, a serious recession, and at worst, a real depression. At that moment, the thing that people called Obama, and that had so little traction, a socialist, begins to actually become more serious, since it begins to look like the benefits of capitalism have not been so evenly spread. And not only that, the benefits of capitalism may not be quite as great as people have thought, and actual policies involved in producing genuine equality of opportunity for all Americans, which would involve spreading the wealth around, may begin to look attractive to some. So I think it's a question really of how Obama wants to, how bad the economic crisis gets, and how committed Obama turns out to be to actually dealing with it rather than sort of putting a Band-Aid on it.
You also talk a little bit about education, and the candidates have been talking about that. So how does affirmative action play into this?
Yeah, I just think affirmative action is, you know, affirmative action has been a policy designed basically to make rich white people feel better about themselves. I mean, the whole goal of affirmative action has turned out to be to make sure that as our campuses get wealthier and wealthier, I mean, college students now are richer than they have ever been in comparison to the rest of the population in the history of America. Our universities, although they're always described as being liberal institutions, are in fact extremely conservative institutions, primarily finishing schools for rich kids. And affirmative action was a technology designed to make sure that the rich kids came in the appropriate colors. But part of my argument is that the problem, you know, of social justice here does not involve making sure that, say, black people are 13.5% of the rich people and 13.5% of the poor people. Social justice involves beginning to decrease the gap between the rich people and the poor people. So I think affirmative action has been a fundamentally conservative policy. I don't think it has a lot of traction anymore. I don't think people care that much about it. Partly because on the left, people have begun to see it makes no difference, and partly because on the right, people have begun to see that it actually doesn't threaten them in any way. What you want is policies that actually will threaten inequality of income in the U.S., and affirmative action won't do that. Whereas, for example, if you started taking away the endowments of all those major universities, people like Harvard and Yale, unless they started actually using those endowments, not just to make themselves better and more glamorous universities, but to begin actually to affect the crises of education in this country, which begin not at the college level, but at pre-K. So Harvard uses its $30 billion endowment to sort of spread the wealth in Cambridge and Boston and start spreading it with not just poor black people, but poor white people and poor Hispanics. That would begin to make a difference. How many black kids there are at Harvard makes no difference whatsoever.
And the country is very excited that we've just elected Barack Obama, an African American, to the presidency. What do they need to focus on more? Not that he's African American, but do we need to focus more on the division of wealth?
Yeah, from my standpoint, the fact he's African American, I mean, the useful thing about him being African American is that it's going to be hard for people to go around saying race is the fundamental problem in American society today. And it's good to get over that view, because while for sure there is still racism in American society, there's obviously not as much racism as there was. And again, if you just think about this, 25, 30 years ago, we were a much more racist country than we are now. We've made a lot of progress in the right direction. 25 or 30 years ago, we were actually a much more economically equal country than we are now. We've made a lot of progress in the wrong direction. So I think if you're actually a liberal and you're interested in equality, the thing to do, and the thing that Obama's success might help us do, is refocus our attention from the problem of race to the problem of money, and begin to think that, we don't want to just appreciate diversity. We want also, when it's appropriate, to begin to minimize diversity. Because after all, diversity really with money is just a name for inequality. Some people have more and some people have less. There's no way in which we're going to get a world in which some people don't have more and some people have less. But in American history, for many, many years, we've had a much more equal society than we have now. And what one would hope, although I confess I don't have very much faith in this actually happening, is that an Obama administration would stop worrying about the charge of socialism and start worrying instead about actually producing policies that would begin to make it so that the poor kids, whether they're white or black or Hispanic, actually did begin to have something like an opportunity that was equal to the one that my children, or for that matter, Obama's children, have.
We've been speaking with Walter Benn Michaels, author of The Trouble with Diversity, How We Learn to Love Identity and Ignore Inequality. Thank you.
Thanks.
You can view Book TV programs, sign up for a weekly email of our schedule, and learn about upcoming programs at booktv.org.